Welcome to what I learned about doing the John Heisman video. I typically learn a lot when I'm doing a research on these videos, and they don't always, what I learn, no, it doesn't always go into the video itself. I try to be pretty, stick to the script in my videos, and I don't ad lib a lot because I'm not really good at it when I'm following a script. I haven't learned that well about how to do that yet, but I thought I'd include some insights into other things I thought besides just historical facts. And I think the biggest thing I took away from doing research on John Heisman was he was an incredibly stand-up guy. You know, you see the stuff that I included in the video, how he was going to marry Edith Miracle, and then she got tuberculosis and he went away. And then because he couldn't stand to see her in the stands, he didn't want memories of her and not being married to her because it hurt too much apparently. So he goes to, he goes south and he marries another woman, and then they get divorced. And he decides that I don't want to cause her social embarrassment. So he leaves Georgia Tech, and think about that. He's at Georgia Tech. He has built them into a powerhouse. But because he's actually thinking of other human beings, he leaves and goes north back to Penn, I think it was. I, you know, that's a stark contrast to some of the other coaches you read about at the times. Okay, like his contemporary coaches probably would have been like Fielding Yost, Walter Camp, a little earlier than him maybe, or Amos, Alonzo, Stag, and Pop Warner. Those probably would have been the top four. Now, when you read stories about Amos, Alonzo, Stag, at least I take away from them, and I haven't done a video about Stag yet, I should, but you take away from those other guys that they tried to claim as much as they possibly could about the early days of college football. Every time you see a letter from Stag or a comment from Stag or an article about Stag, Stag is trying to claim he invented this, or he invented the huddle, or he was the first one to throw the forward pass. Anything they could get their hands on. And maybe that's because he had to compete so much with Fielding Yost. Stag was at the University of Chicago when Yost was at Michigan, and the two competed not only in conference, but they competed, for recognition and for prestige. And I'm not going to go into Fielding Yost too much, but that guy tried to claim everything too. And you see almost none of that with John Heisman. Almost zero. I can't remember. I mean, he was a prolific writer, and he did have ideas that I didn't even include in the video. Like, I thought about doing another short video about a solution he had about how to pick national champions for college football in the 30s. He had the idea in the 30s. But I think that Walter Camp, for example, Yale made a lot of money. He had a slush fund there, and he purposely was against the forward pass for so many years, despite the fact that football at that time was killing people, the game itself. He was dead set against the forward pass, not because it wasn't good for the game, because it wasn't good for Walter Camp. Walter Camp didn't want things to change because what he had was working and making him tons of money and keeping him in a position of power. And you never saw that with John Heisman. And I think that that's probably the biggest takeaway that I had throughout all the reading about John Heisman and all the articles and things like that. He had some other ideas for how to fix college football, and college football continues to be dangerous, and it certainly was dangerous back then. He had some other ideas about how to remove danger from the game. For example, he thought that it would be best that there would be no interference for ball carriers. In other words, well, not no interference, but for example, guards and tackles, the linemen couldn't be right in front of a ball carrier. The backs in the backfields, this is something I just read about a little bit and I didn't do a lot of research on. But he had a lot of different ideas about football. I think that were good for the game and not just good for John Heisman. And as I talked about in that video, his Heisman shift was, the effectiveness was negated by the rule change. I think it was in 1921, where you had to be set a full second before you could start. And that rule change also affected Newt Rockne's shift offense as well. I'd like to do a Newt Rockne shift offense video and maybe some other videos about offense. there's a lot of ground to cover, and there's not a whole lot of time. What else about Heisman that I think was impressive? I think that, given that he was a stand-up guy and given his reputation, I think that it's maybe it's karma that of the five people I mentioned there, John Heisman, Walter Camp, Stag, Fielding Yost, of all those people, Heisman is the one that is mentioned all of the time today in connection in college football, because of the trophy. And the Heisman Trophy is something that you think is overblown unless one of your players is going to possibly win it, and then it's the greatest thing ever. There's a bunch of kids playing next door on a trampoline. And I thought about not doing this right now and maybe cutting the sound out, but it is life, right? It is kids. Remember when you were young and you could, like, I don't know, throw yourself at the ground and it didn't hurt? I have a theory on that, by the way. It has nothing to do with football. I think we could throw ourselves at the ground years ago and it didn't hurt as much because the ground has gotten harder over the decades. How about that? If I throw myself at the ground now, I'm probably breaking things. Years ago, I could throw myself at the ground 10, 15 times a day and it didn't hurt at all. You could throw yourself into another football player or something and it didn't really hurt that much. Now it'd just be like hell on earth. All right, anything else about John Heisman I can think of? Because I'm doing these without any notes. This is the ad lib, ad hoc, off the cuff thing. Let me know what you think of these videos. I'll try to put them out, if not for no other reason. I think they're at least interesting to me about what I learned, and it's kind of a recap of what I learned outside the actual content itself. Let me know what you think, if they're any worthwhile, or I just will go do them and then I'll publish them or something. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Again, this is John Johnston, Hardcore College Football History. Thank you. And I appreciate your support so far. And the 2024 football season is almost here. And boy, it's going to, you know what? It's going to be the funnest season of our lives.